had spent 14 months trying to create one weekend that felt peaceful enough to remember without flinching. That was the entire dream. Not perfection. Not a magazine spread. Not some performance where every chair angle mattered more than the people in it. Just peace. A clean little pocket of time where the people I loved would stand in one place, eat invisible, and for once nothing underneath the surface would split open. I should have known that my brother Sammy would never mistake a fragile quiet for something that needed protecting. He had always treated timing like a private superpower. As children, he never lied because he enjoyed lying. He lied because he loved control. He loved being the only person in the room who knew when a story would change. He could turn a normal dinner into an ambush just by waiting until everyone had sat down, served themselves, and decided the night was safe. Then he would say, casually, as if mentioning rain, that he had failed a class, quit a job, lent somebody money, crashed a car, or promised something on behalf of the family he had no authority to promise. He believed, with almost religious confidence, that people were least powerful once they were already assembled. A scattered family can walk away. A gathered family has to manage itself. That was his gift. He knew exactly when politeness would do half his work for him. By the time I got engaged, I had learned to keep him at a careful distance. Not cut off, not dramatic, just padded. He was 23 then, still moving through life like consequences were things that happened to slower people. He switched jobs often, borrowed money in charming tones, and had a way of speaking about his future as if it were a glamorous apartment currently being renovated for him by the universe. My parents called him impulsive, with the tenderness families reserve for patterns they are too tired to name properly. I called him manageable, which was my own form of denial. My wedding was in Santa Fe, small by my mother's standards, expensive by mine, and organized around one simple mercy. We rented a hacienda-style inn so most of us would stay in the same place. No caravans, no scattered hotels, no major logistics on the day itself. People would arrive in waves, settle, eat themselves into some temporary version of calm, and then we would get through the ceremony with everyone still basically intact. At least, that was the theory. My husband Idris and I flew in on a Tuesday. The ceremony was Saturday. My parents arrived Wednesday, my aunt and cousins Thursday, and Sammy texted the family group at 9:17 Thursday night to say he had a minor delay. But he would land Friday afternoon with a friend. A friend. I remember staring at those two words with a low little annoyance, not fear. At that point, friend could mean anything. A coworker, a roommate, a girl he had been seeing for 3 weeks, someone whose flight happened to line up with his. My mother asked, "Do we need to add anyone to the dinner count?" He replied, "She won't be complicated." That sentence alone should have warned me. Nobody says a person won't be complicated unless they already know the person's existence is the complication. But I was tired, and wedding tiredness makes cowards out of smart women. You start sorting every surprise by whether it is survivable, not whether it is acceptable. Friday afternoon, I was in the courtyard with my maid of honor, trying to decide whether the string lights looked warmer before sunset or after, when my mother called me the way only mothers can call their daughters when they need you to move toward disaster without alarming the room. "Can you come to the front?" I knew immediately that this was not about luggage. There are tones adults use when they are trying to hold a scene together with both hands. My mother was using one. At the front of the inn, Sammy was standing by the steps wearing linen like he had been cast as someone's easygoing son. Beside him was a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was beautiful, in a way that made the moment feel even more staged. Not because beauty matters morally, but because he had clearly imagined how this entrance would land. She had one hand on the small of her back, travel-weary eyes, and a fitted dress that made her pregnancy impossible to misread. Not maybe pregnant, not rumor pregnant, not something you politely ignore until invited. Visibly, plainly, heavily pregnant. My father was frozen in the expression he uses when he thinks a better version of reality might still arrive if he waits 10 more seconds. My mother, who can survive almost anything if she has been warned first, looked betrayed in a way that made her seem younger. Sammy smiled like a host. "Everyone, this is Lena." Not, "I'm sorry I should have told you." Not, "There's a lot to explain." Not even, "I know this is sudden," just a name. As if we were late to our own lines. Lena offered the kind of nervous smile people wear when they know they have entered a room mid-sentence. I remember hating, for one irrational second, that she looked more frightened than guilty. Because fear is humanizing. And I did not want to humanize anyone yet. I wanted someone cleaner to blame. Sammy hugged me first. He smelled like airport cologne and adrenaline. "You look stressed," he whispered. "Please don't make this weird." That sentence snapped something into focus. He had not come asking for grace. He had arrived demanding emotional labor before hello was even over. I said, out loud, "Who is she?" He gave me that small, patient look he uses when he is preparing to make my discomfort sound like a social mistake. "My girlfriend." "Since when?" I asked. "A while." "That is not an answer." He laughed softly. "It's been private." Private. A beautiful word for cowardice when used by charming men. Lena tried to help. She said, "It's okay. Really, I know this is sudden." And there it was. My first clue that she had been told we knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough that her presence would not feel like a detonation. Someone had been protected from the truth, and it was not my family. We got them upstairs. We got them water. We completed the choreography that adults complete in front of strangers because collapse is considered rude. Then my mother shut the door to her room, looked at me, and said, "He did this on purpose." My father said, "Let's not assume the worst yet." My maid of honor, who had no blood tie incentive to be noble, said, "What exactly would the better explanation be?" The first explanation arrived at dinner, which Sammy apparently believed was the proper stage for Act 2. There were 10 of us at the table. Candles, terracotta dishes, small strings of music from the bar. Everybody already overperforming normal, Sammy waited until the second round of plates landed. Then he rested one hand on Lena's chair and said, "Before anyone starts gossiping, I just want to be up front. The baby isn't biologically mine, but I'm going to raise her as my own." The room changed temperature. My aunt set down her fork too carefully. My father blinked once, slowly, like a judge returning to a file. My mother went so still. I knew she was furious. Lena looked at the tablecloth, not ashamed, braced. That was when I understood this reveal had been rehearsed between them. Not in content, maybe, but in rhythm. He knew the order. First the relationship, then the pregnancy, then the redemption beat. I'm still choosing responsibility. He had designed the scene so that any objection afterward would sound not merely inconvenient, but cruel. Say, "This is not the time," and you sound heartless. Say, "Why didn't you tell us?" and he pivots to trust. Say, "This is my wedding weekend," and now the least protected person in the room is a pregnant stranger. Watching your face for signs of rejection. That was the trap. He had built it beautifully. My father asked the first careful question. "How long has this been serious?" Sammy said, "Long enough that I knew this was real." My mother said, "That is still not a time frame." Lena answered this one. "Since January." January. 5 months. 5 months of silence. Family calls, holiday photos, budget talks, wedding logistics, and not one word. Not because there had been no opportunity. Because he had chosen this opportunity over all the others. The rest of dinner never recovered. People performed appetite. Nobody ate. Sammy kept making these small, softly reasonable statements about not wanting drama, not knowing how to tell everyone, not wanting the relationship to become the topic before he knew it would last. Which was rich, considering he had just set it on fire in the middle of my wedding dinner and called that restraint. Later that night, my mother cried in my room. Not because a woman was pregnant, not because her son loved someone complicated, but because, as she put it, he used your wedding as emotional blackmail. Now, if anyone says they feel blindsided, he can act like they're attacking her. That was exactly it. He had chosen the place where social decency would do his public relations for him. By Saturday morning, there were 3 unofficial camps. My father, who believed every family disaster could still be managed if nobody used the word disaster. My mother and aunt, who were furious about the concealment and the timing but trying not to direct it at Lena, which is harder work than people admit. And the cousins, who had already moved into group chat analysis, trying to decide whether Sammy was brave, stupid, or fundamentally addicted to reveal culture. I was somewhere else entirely. I was trying to get married inside a weekend that no longer belonged to the shape I had paid for. You have to understand something about weddings. People think the pressure is vanity. Centerpieces, seating, weather, dresses. But the deeper pressure is narrative control. You spend money trying to compress dozens of complicated relationships into one coherent public memory. And once someone introduces a stronger story, yours does not merely share space with it. It gets demoted by it. Now, everyone at breakfast was not just discussing floral timing. They were discussing paternity, family morality, acceptance, shame, who had known what, and whether my brother had chosen my wedding. Because a private announcement would have left him exposed. I could feel my own ceremony shrinking in people's eyes. Not erased, just crowded out. The ceremony itself went fine, which almost made everything worse. Because good logistics can disguise emotional collapse well enough that outsiders think no harm was done. This guy behaved. I did not cry. Idris looked at me like he was witnessing something holy. For 22 minutes, I was allowed my own life. Then came photos. There is always one moment when a wedding stops being emotional and becomes administrative. This was ours. The photographer had the family list. Immediate family. Parents. Siblings. Grandmother. Then combinations. Then cousins. Then friend groups. Lena stood back. Not dramatically. Not wounded. Just uncertain, which was somehow harder to watch. I had already decided, privately, that she would not be in the official immediate family portraits. Not as punishment. As fact. She was not a secret because of me. And she was not suddenly official because my brother chose my wedding day. To force the issue. If they stayed together, if the family grew, if years passed, we could take other photos. But my wedding album was not a referendum chamber for his timing strategy. The problem was, I had not yet said that aloud. Sammy said it for me by objecting before anyone excluded her. He stepped toward the photographer and said, "She's with us." Not, "Would it be okay?" Not, "What do you think?" Not even, "Can we add one with Lena too?" "She's with us." A declaration, not a request. The photographer, who had wisely decided long ago that family politics are above her pay grade, looked at me. Every face did. That was the exact moment my brother moved the conflict from private discomfort into public image. Because now, whatever I said would happen on camera. If I yielded, he would get the thing he had been steering toward all weekend. Formal recognition inside a family document, created during the one event no one could replay. If I refused, I would become, in that frozen second, the bride rejecting a pregnant woman in front of the entire family. That was the cruelty of his timing. He had made my options look uglier than his actions. I said, as evenly as I could, "We can do one with everybody later. Right now we're doing immediate family." He smiled, which I hated more than if he had shouted. "Lena is my family," I said. "Maybe. But this is not the weekend where you get to force everyone to prove they agree on your schedule." Silence. The dangerous kind. The kind that tells you nobody will remember your tone accurately later, only your role in the scene. Lena stepped back first. That detail matters. Not because it absolves me, but because it showed the one person with the least power was also the only one not trying to stage manage everyone else. She said, quietly, "It's okay. Please just do the photo." Sammy's face changed. Not hurt, not exactly angry, exposed. Because for half a second, his protective narrative slipped. Now it did not look like he was defending her dignity. It looked like he was using her presence as leverage against mine. My mother said, very calmly, "Take the picture." So we did. I smiled in exactly 3 frames. None of them reached my eyes. That night, my father tried to broker peace, which is what he calls it when he asks women to metabolize men's choices faster. He said Sammy felt judged. He said maybe fear had made him secretive. He said becoming a parent, even indirectly, might have scrambled his sense of timing. He said weddings are emotional. He said maybe everyone was protecting themselves poorly, all of which may have contained some truth. But none of it changed the structure. He had 100 private moments available to him. Phone calls, visits, any ordinary Tuesday. He chose the one weekend where disagreement would look cruel, where cameras would magnify everything, and where our family's desire not to be monstrous could be converted into his shelter. That was not fear, that was strategy. The worst part is that I did feel for Lena. I still do. Because imagine stepping into a family through a doorway built out of somebody else's event. Imagine realizing, midway through dinner, that your partner did not just fail to prepare them. He failed to prepare you for how much of the fallout would land on your body first. Pregnancy makes people turn symbolic the moment they stop seeing you clearly. You become a test of compassion, a proxy for morality, a way for everybody else to perform who they are. I knew that, and I hated him for making me prove, publicly, that I knew it. 2 weeks later, after the wedding photos were delivered, Sammy called me in the tone people use when they want an apology without asking for one directly. He said the family had made Lena feel unwelcome. He said my comment at photos had embarrassed him. He said if I had loved him, I would have understood how hard it was for him to step up. I let him finish. Then I said if you had loved me, you would have told me in February. He was quiet, so I kept going. You did not introduce your life. You deployed it. You chose the one weekend where everyone would be afraid to react honestly, and then you acted like honesty itself was abuse. I am not sorry you didn't get to use my wedding album as proof that your timeline was now our timeline. He said I was making everything about me. That line almost made me laugh. My wedding. The thing literally built around me and Idris, which I had somehow spent 3 days defending from the accusation of being too centered on itself. That is how people like Sammy win, if you let them. They do something wildly placement-specific, and then shame you for noticing the placement. Months later, my mother told me that he and Lena were still together. The family had thawed. My aunt sent baby clothes. My father had lunch with him alone. Lena, apparently, was kinder and steadier than any of us had been allowed to see that first weekend. Good. I mean that. I do. I do not need their future to fail in order for my boundary to have been real. That is another trap families lay for women. If the relationship survives, your objection gets rewritten as hysteria, as if outcome erases method, as if a thing cannot be both long-term true and badly delivered. Maybe he loves her. Maybe he became a good father. Maybe the child is adored. Maybe years from now, those wedding weekend photos will look like the shaky preface to a decent family story. None of that changes what he did to me in the moment. He used my once-in-a-lifetime event as a shield against direct reaction. He converted everybody's manners into his emotional armor. He made a stranger absorb suspicion, made our parents absorb shock, and made me absorb the accusation that protecting the shape of my own wedding was somehow less moral than endorsing the shape of his reveal. People love asking when they hear stories like this, what was the real betrayal? The secret relationship? The hidden pregnancy? The family photo fight? The manipulation? The guilt afterward? But that question is too tidy. The real betrayal was the architecture. It was how carefully he chose a setting where every decent person around him would have to work harder, not to seem cruel than he had ever worked, not to be selfish. And once you see someone do that, you can never fully unsee it, because then you realize some people do not just make messes. They select rooms where everyone else will have to clean them up. Informal wear.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.